2701 Summer Street in Stanford. When I left law school, when I was in law school, I was at the FCC as part of the Institute for Communications Law Studies. I was certified in communications law in addition to my Juris Doctor, and worked on telecommunications matters starting in Stanford in the early 90s. Then I went to Washington, D.C., where I worked for a major law firm and represented both oil, gas, and telecommunications companies, both U.S. and globally, the largest utilities and the largest companies, the Fortune 100, and worked on spectrum RF compliance matters as well as other matters. I was later then asked to lead some companies as a regulatory officer, and later led two companies. Those companies were respectively sold to Verizon and AT&T, the last one in 2018. And those companies, prior to them being sold to Verizon and AT&T, had networks throughout Stanford, as well as throughout the entire United States, in some cases globally. And the majority of the millimeter wave 5G spectrum in the United States of America, held by those companies, was in my name. So I spent a few decades regulating those companies. Oh, there we are. Thank you. I don't know who did that, but and so it being asked to comply with the FCC's ancient RF exposure standard is something I did for many, many years. And I wanted to point out a few things about that, and then point out a few things about the substantial powers that the municipalities hold. Unlike what we heard earlier, it's quite clear that there's substantial powers that the municipalities hold. And I want to talk about that in the context of some background experience. I was a part and parcel of a U.S. Supreme Court case called Gulf Power 2 on pole attachments. It's a signature pole attachment case. And I've also been involved in a variety of other recent legal matters, including and not limited to as amicus brief for the Environmental Health Trust v. FCC, which Dr. Davis mentioned. I was part of an FDA petition which included a very detailed RF measurement matter that went to the FDA, and the FDA changed their website about 4 or 5 months ago while they're still considering our petition, but they changed their website because the website showed very unsafe uses of mobile phones when they were trying to show people how to use mobile phones. So there's that's another indicator that the regulatory agency has significant problems. Another case is the Balance Group v. FCC, which is a large-scale satellite mega constellation case. That case was dismissed on standing. However, things came out of it. One was the Government Accountability Office report, U.S. Government Accountability Office, recommending that everything we asked for, including environmental NEPA reviews, including for RF exposure, that they requested the FCC to actually basically adopt everything we asked for in the case. And two, this book just came out, Satellite Mega Constellations and the Urgent Need for Regulation. This is an international law book, both of U.S. law and international law on the subject. And it's the first law book of its kind on mega constellation matters. So those are a variety. I'm also involved in a case involving a cerebral hemorrhage that's in D.C. Superior Court. So that's some background on those matters. So and two other things I do, I'm also president of something called the National Spectrum Management Association, or NSMA. What NSMA does is it was created in 1984 at the request of the FCC. And the request by the FCC in 1984 to create it was because AT&T had been established in 1984 to have becoming in need of a great breakup of Ma Bell. And the federal government knew that because the federal government runs a variety of wireless networks for defense, for managing wildlife, for managing all kinds of things, that they needed to work with industry and figure out how industry would not cause harmful interference in federal networks and vice versa, as well as how industry would not cause interference into itself, so that a baby monitor wouldn't be interfered with by a mobile phone and a satellite and all those kinds of things. So fast forward to today, after the 38th annual conference of NSMA, we did a series of panels on this subject, and we've been working on this for quite a while. And it's my considered opinion that the first thing that I recommend you be asking yourselves is, are the 4G networks that are already in Stanford and surrounding areas complying with even the FCC's ancient rules? And can they provide detailed studies for public review and scientific analysis to prove that they're complying with even those ancient standards. I think that's a super minimal baseline that they should be willing to show that around schools, around libraries, around transportation hubs, and everywhere else that they're complying, showing compliance with their activities before and prior to considering whether to adopt a template for them to deploy 5G. And also, their compliance could show whether or not they're meeting their broadband delivery requirements. So if everyone's concerned about the amount of bandwidth everyone's getting, let's show that they're actually doing what they said they're going to do for that as well as complying with safety matters. If we can go up a slide or two, I'll talk a little bit about some background there. One is the significant powers that municipalities hold include zoning, building and construction permits, health, safety, and welfare when it comes to fire, when it comes to electrical deployments, when it comes to wind and weight loading on antennas. I've been head of companies where we've deployed thousands of antennas around the country and internationally, including in Stanford. And you have to engineer them to make sure that there's wind and weight loading and a variety of other safety measures. Those are all well within municipality control. And of course, again, going back to the original statement, can they even show they're complying with the existing standards before granting the ability to deploy even more? And I think my considered opinion is based on some research I've already done with calibrated equipment that the industry uses itself to measure its own compliance to its shareholders, that it used its money to deploy 4G, for example. They have to prove that they deployed what they said they deployed to their shareholders. They could prove that to the municipalities as well, and they could show the studies that comport with the FCC's ancient human RF exposure and specific absorption rate standards. You might be aware that the iPhone 12 was declared in France to not be compliant. That happened very recently, for example. And there's a variety of reasons why. I have reason to believe that a lot of the studies that have been conducted to show compliance with base stations aren't always using equipment that's capable of measuring the spectrum that they purport to be measuring. Those are called spectrum analyzers, and the industry has to use a specific spectrum analyzer to calibrate the measurement of the exact spectrum bands they're utilizing. And there's a lot of spectrum analyzers out there that are incapable of measuring 4G and certain 5G bands. And however, a lot of the companies that are doing the measurements aren't always 100% using the equipment they're supposed to use. It'd be like you going into the deli and asking for them to measure a half pound of turkey for you, and they don't have a scale, but they just have somebody hold it in their hand and say, well, here's a half pound. No, I want to use a calibrated set of equipment that can measure exactly whether or not that's a half pound of turkey. So that is a simplistic way of describing it, but we do have very detailed studies on this matter, and I'm happy to point to that if you want to look at it. But more importantly, I think you should be asking the industry itself to show that it's complying with existing studies. There's other areas, business law, well within your purview, tax assessment, property taxes, obviously criminal charges and law enforcement are well within your purview. And of course, personal injury cases, contract disputes, and business litigation, well within your purview. Second, going back to compliance. These are questions to ask directly to the mobile carriers. When they come to you for a 5G system and their prior 4G systems, were they mapped? Did they build where they say they were going to build? There's many cases out there where there's blanket approvals and the base station is all of a sudden 110 feet from where they said it was going to be, or it's not in the right part of the pole, or it wasn't built at all, or things that were built that weren't even approved. So compliance is a major area where you have 100% authority. And also, did they meet their broadband measures that they claimed they were going to give to the public And that's important for public safety, for 911, for a variety of other matters. Can they prove that? So, and were the sites identified by a certified surveyor where they said where they're going to build? Is there some sort of post-build analysis that proves that they built where they said they're going to build to the criteria they said they're going to build to? And again, there's a variety of other compliance matters, building permits, meet height, weight, safety, wind loading, electrical and fire safety criteria, geographic coordinates, poles, ducts, conduits, and rights-of-way usage. And all of this then dovetails to, if they're not complying with that, are they also not complying with the ancient human RF exposure laws? And of course, as mentioned prior, in most countries and in many situations, those ancient laws, especially since they've been remanded in federal court, are up for current review right now. They need to be reviewed, and the FCC and the FDA have to come back with updated rules. So, taking that all in context, it seems quite an interesting ask to go pell-mell into 5G without showing compliance with existing 4G deployments and also showing an apprehension and understanding of the existing law. And the existing law is quite clear that the FCC has been remanded in federal court. So that's a quick summary. Happy to provide any backup for anything I've mentioned here in terms of legal matters, in terms of RF exposure. There's a few slides after this that can give you a quick look at the kind of maps you should be getting, pre and post built. Are they certified in each and every place they said they're going to build, that they're compliant with the RF exposure standards? And will they publish that, and will they make that available to the medical community and everyone else so they can see what kind of radiation is coming? And they're stating, they're certifying that they're meeting the ancient FCC standard. And in many cases, it's my considered opinion that they might not be meeting the ancient FCC standard, and that would be subject to them proving that they are and showing the studies when they first built in 2012 or 2018 or whenever they built, let's say a 3G or a 4G. Can they prove that they built to the FCC standard? And is that something in terms of a matter of candor that you'd want to know prior to approving the 5G network builds? I think well recommended. This is a location, a rooftop location, where you could ask a variety. You could do this for every rooftop location. You could ask, are you compliant not only with the FCC human RF exposure requirements, but are you compliant with, when it comes to public safety? Often there's a bunch of federal standards around diversity. And if a network goes down, there could be a problem if there's not backup and all kinds of other matters that are, again, well within your purview, which be part of your building requirements. And we can skip that as well. And thank you for your time, and forward to any questions.
So we'll start with where